Good morning. Thank you. It's great to be here. Is that really loud? It's really loud in my ear. I'm going to hope that I get this remote right. So I thought that Brenda was going to be talking about what's your lane, and then I was going to make some really cute road reference because I'm going to talk to you about detours. But instead she ran us through this wonderful exercise. So we're going to talk about navigating detours and mapping your personal brand. Oh, that's a different, there we go. That's what we're talking about. I guess I have to aim it here, right? Okay. So detours oftentimes are, we think they're a pain, right? A longer way, a more cumbersome way to get from A to B. But what I'd like you to do is kind of throw that notion on its head and think about how detours can be a way to explore C, D, F, or P. And we're going to go through some of that. We all have a story. A lot of us don't want to tell our story. We think maybe it's not relevant or it's not interesting or whatever. I would ask you to find some grace in your story because your story is you, and it's important, and it's all about how you tell it. So great minds think alike. Cindy and Nicole gave you a book. Well, in your little book, in your great bag, there's a little book from Mom Corps as well. And I was going to ask you to take it out and jot down thoughts, but you can use your black book for that too. Anyway, as you go through today, you're listening to a lot of really great speakers, and it's conjuring up a lot of thoughts for all of you. And the important thing is to write it down because it's all helping you form what your story is. So unplanned detours. We've probably all had them, right? I know I certainly have. And the trick is to understand that a detour, just because you're on a detour, you think you're not going where you're supposed to go, but maybe it's really where you are supposed to be. And I would just like you to think about that a little bit. So to get us in the mood, I thought we'd talk about a couple very well-known people and their detours. Julia Child, we know her as a French cooking maven, right? Well, guess what? She didn't even learn how to cook until she was 36. She started her career as a copywriter. And then the war broke out, and she really wanted to be in the war. And so she went to the Women's Army Corps and was told she was too tall. She's 6'2". She was 6'2". And so she took a job as a typist at the OSS, which became the CIA. Well, she went to school at Smith, so she's a pretty smart cookie, right? And very quickly, they learned that she was way more than a typist. So she ended up having a very successful career in the CIA. She had assignments in Ceylon and China and had quite a career. She got married later in life, moved to Paris. Her husband had lived in France before and loved French cooking. So she decided to take a cooking course at Cordon Bleu. And in doing that, she realized that, hey, there is a way to make French cooking a lot more accessible to Americans. And she knew herself and knew that it was going to take somebody who was approachable and somebody who was distinctly not French to bring French cooking to America. And so she ended up collaborating with a couple women that she met in cooking school and wrote probably the biggest selling cookbook of all times, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. She turned that, as we all know, into a very lucrative and big career, and she is synonymous with French cooking, certainly in this country. But that wasn't at all what she started out doing. Martha Stewart, another one. The maven of entertaining right now. There's a theme here, can you tell? But she wasn't always that. She started off, she had a scholarship at college. She went to Barnard. She also modeled to help pay her way through college. She got married in college, finished, had a baby, and then went to work as a stockbroker on Wall Street. Now, this was 1965. You may have seen Wolf on Wall Street. That was 1985. You saw women and how they were treated in 1985. Imagine 20 years earlier, being a woman, a stockbroker on Wall Street. She actually did a really great job. She was very successful and was there for about 8 or 10 years until the market crashed in the mid-70s. And she and her husband had bought a historic farmhouse in Westport, Connecticut. And so she took that opportunity, that break, and renovated the farmhouse. And in renovating the farmhouse, started to teach people in Connecticut cooking because she had this newly renovated kitchen, and she had learned a lot about cooking and canning and gardening and entertaining from her mom and her grandparents as she grew up. Well, 2 years later, she started a catering business, and then we all kind of know what happened. She became the first female billionaire when she took Martha Stewart living public. So again, took an opportunity, took a detour, and made something very different in her life. Well, I know sometimes with famous people, it's hard to find yourself in the story. So maybe you can find yourself in my story. This is my family. My husband's back there, thank you. We moved to Colorado 10 years ago. My story in a nutshell is I went to a big East Coast university. I started off on Wall Street. I went to a big business school. I had a very lucrative and, successful marketing career. I started 2 companies. I've started 3 companies actually now. And people hear that story and they think, wow, she must have had it all planned out. That sounds like she had a progression and she did what she was supposed to do. That's because that's the story I'm telling you. So what I'm going to tell you today is what some of my detours were. And hopefully you can find yourself in that story and see that you can actually learn from your detours. So I went to Duke, got a great education, went to Wall Street, where that was the plum job at the time, right? We got paid then a lot of money to dress like that. Teresa Taylor talked about that too. Clearly, it made a big impression on us. We had to dress like men. And I thought that was the cat's meow. Thankfully, that's where I met my husband, but it was a great job. And then I was assigned to the savings and loan group. And I was calling on savings and loans in the deep south, in Texas and Alabama and Florida. And I would trot down there in my navy blue suit and my white cotton blouse and my little bow tie, and I would sit across the desk from them, and I'd try to persuade them to take a credit facility from my bank. Well, these good old boys would sit across the desk from me, and what they saw was a young, gregarious, blonde woman. And I had a really hard time being taken seriously. So over time, I tried to alter my approach and I started wearing a wedding ring. I started to try to be even more serious and more, what I thought was manlike. And it occurred to me that, hey, if I can't be myself and be successful, then I'm probably in the wrong environment. So what did I do? I took detour number 1. I went back to business school. Wharton was a great, to me, school is the great equalizer. Even though it was only 25% women when I was there, I flourished. I have always flourished in an educational environment. But it also allowed me to find my way to marketing, which was a great way to play to my strengths, a great way to use my creativity skills, and it was a great fit for me. I had a number of really awesome jobs. You can thank me for Fresh Scent Bleach. You can thank me for those Vanity Fair napkins with that wonderful shell design that you probably use every night. Fresh Step cat litter, that's not up there. And then miraculously, I thought at the time, I found myself as the number 2 person at this big public relations agency in New York City, Hill and Knowlton. And I thought, wow, this is kind of the penultimate for my career. And it was for a long time, but my boss and my mentor, he was a brilliant, brilliant guy. But he had this executive assistant who he'd had for 10 years maybe. And she had a family, but she was at his beck and call, I kid you not, 24/7. He would call her in the middle of the night and say, I need this. And she was there for him. And I think that really it really, he had an expectation of anybody who worked for him that was driven by that relationship. And that was fine for a while, but then I had my first child. And both my husband and I were commuting in from Westport, Connecticut, where Martha lives. And we were, both an hour and a half away from our kids, both having demanding careers. And I just was not willing to make those sacrifices anymore. So my priorities had changed. That was detour number 2. So what I did was I looked and said, okay, what do I really love to do and what am I really good at? And this whole creativity and strategic marketing was something that I had a really good knack for. And so I was able, it was the mid-90s, and budgets were big back then. And so I was able to kind of take this expertise that I had and turn it into a business out in Connecticut, being a free agent, being a consultant. And I had great clients. I, brought Don Julio to the States. I worked at MCI, worked for MCI, helped them brand Friends and Family, which became Verizon Friends and Family. I did a lot of really cool projects. And I thought, again, wow, this is awesome. I have my own schedule, and I'm doing stuff that I love. And then the internet exploded, and by then I had 2 kids, 2 little kids, and we were a very active family. And I saw a market opportunity, which is something that in my marketing career I've kind of always tried to do, is see an untapped opportunity. And we had a really hard time finding kids' sporting goods all in one place. They take dance class, you go to the dance store, soccer, blah, blah, blah. And so the internet was exploding, and I decided to meet this need and start a business. And so I started an internet business that was called Kiddie Sport. And it was one-stop shopping for information and sporting goods for kids. I had a barn in my backyard. We finished that off. We had the office there. My entire executive staff or senior staff was moms who used to have New York careers and didn't want to make that commute anymore, just like me, and wanted something cool to do out in Connecticut. And we had a great time. And it was an awesome endeavor. Then I was in the process of selling it, and 9/11 happened, and my husband was in it. And you can imagine, that changed our life in immeasurable ways. I don't normally get emotional when I talk about that. It was a long time ago. And so the combination of selling my business and 9/11 and, it caused us to reevaluate kind of priorities and family and all of that. We ended up having a 3rd child. That's why we had our 3rd child. And in the interim, I built spec homes because, again, I saw a market opportunity. There were homes that weren't at a certain price point, and so I decided to build some spec homes just because I'd sold my business and I wanted to keep busy. But the long end of this was that we really wanted out of the Northeast. And so I took my 3rd detour, which was moving here. And we moved to Colorado 10 years ago. And I decided, it became Colorado because my husband ended up finding a great CEO job out here. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. I have this little guy, and I have 2 elementary school kids, and I've done a lot. And I'm going to be an executive's wife, and I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom, and I'm going to, enjoy Colorado life because that was what it was all about. I'm going to go kayaking on Tuesdays, and and that was great. That was actually really great for a while. But then what I was doing was I was ignoring a big part of myself, which is, the fulfillment that I get from working and having a professional life. And so I went through a lot of self-discovery because it wasn't what I had done on the East Coast. I didn't think I could really do here. Very different types of industries. And I didn't see a path to being a marketing consultant, or certainly, couldn't start another internet company because that ship had sailed a long time ago. So I found myself, so I'm here today as president of Mom Corps. I started it 2 years ago. And again, it was, to me, an unmet need. I saw in the experience that I'd had with my internet company, I had hired a lot of women who wanted to work flexibly, wanted to, synthesize work and life, as we've been talking about, and couldn't find a way to do it. Now, that was 1999, but still, in 2009, it seemed like it was the same. It was still really challenging for people. A number of my colleagues from business school, same situation. And so I just kept coming across this idea of there's lots of women and men, but women who want to blend it all, who have invested a lot of time and money in their education and their career and can't find a way to make it work. So that's what Mom Corps is all about, is trying to make that match and get companies to think about hiring a little bit differently. So what causes detours? Wrong environment for me. Wall Street was the wrong environment. But it took me, you know, if I hadn't had that, I would have never gone back to business school. And if I hadn't gone back to business school, I probably might not have found marketing. Changing priorities. Kids is probably the #1, changing priorities. If I hadn't had my priorities changed, I probably would have stayed in corporate America. And if I'd stayed in corporate America, I probably wouldn't have been open to seeing the trend of like the internet and been able to start an internet business, because you just get in your mode of, you know, right, you're getting a paycheck every week, and so that's what you do. Lack of fulfillment. You know, if I hadn't stopped cold turkey and been a stay-at-home mom, I probably wouldn't have been able to go through all of that self-discovery and to find myself where I am now, which is helping other women, which is very, very rewarding. Okay, there. So teachings from my journey. Always keep networking. Networking, very important. It doesn't have to be business networking. It can be alumni stuff. It can be, you know, you meet somebody who does something really cool at school and you say, you know, let's go to coffee. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to give up 30 minutes to talk about themselves. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Take the time to be introspective. You have to do the work. You have to really look at yourself. That's what your little notes and all of these exercises today are about. And stay current. If you're not current now, you know, the digital world has exploded. You kind of need to hop on that ship and embrace all of the stuff that's going on now, because otherwise you're going to find yourself kind of behind the 8 ball. So take a class, teach a class, whatever. Do a webinar. So all of these detours that you've had, that I've had, all of this thinking helps you to map your brand. And so, you know, it's taken all of these different experiences for me to kind of stand up here and talk about what my personal brand is. I'm going to give you 5 tips that I think are important for mapping your brand. And we'll have this on a handout up at our table over lunch too. But #1, collect your own data. Think about what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you enjoy doing. I mean, do all of that introspective work. That's a big part of it. 2, get feedback from people you like and trust. It's important to know how people perceive you and what other people think you're good at, because there is some, you have to blend perception with what other people think of you and what you think of yourself, right? I mean, you can't market, an example, Clorox is about cleaning products, right? Well, Clorox wouldn't tell you that they also own Hidden Valley Ranch, because that would be a total disconnect. But guess what? They do. So you have to, you know, it's important to understand how the marketplace perceives you. And you're going to get a lot of good intel from if you talk to friends and talk to former coworkers or former bosses or former people that work for you. Write your bio. I'm a big believer in starting with the bio, because the bio is your story. If you start with a resume is just this chronological regurgitation of everything you've done. You have to have it, but it's not your story. It doesn't weave through everything, and that's the exercise. Is what can you weave through everything that you've done? And let's talk about our soft skills here too, because those soft skills, those volunteer commitments, all of that stuff that you've done, that is totally relevant. Think about how you weave that together and what part that plays in your story. Practice your story. That's a big part of it too. You have to be comfortable talking about your story. You look at Julia Childs and Martha Stewart. They both figured stuff out in a very public way. They told their story. They weren't afraid to be up there. They were brave. Women have a high degree of self-doubt. They have this little voice that sits on our shoulders all the time. I would ask you to quiet that voice and just start to tell your story. to whoever will listen when you're networking, you know, and as the more you tell it, the more comfortable you're going to get with it, and it's going to become more a part of you. And then finally, network. This is the second time I've said this. So you may not know this about me, but that when I chose to be a full-time mom, I also chose to shut down this entire part of my life. And I didn't network, and I learned a lesson from that. So I would just encourage everybody to just keep, no matter what life stage you're in, you've got little kids in diapers, you can still make time to do something that keeps you out there and gets you thinking and meeting people that bring different thoughts to you and bring different things to your life. So detours are good. You can learn from them. They may not, as I said in the beginning, you may not be on the road that you thought you were going to be on, but it doesn't mean it's not the road you're supposed to be on. So just think about that as you go through and you write down your little notes. And use your Mom Core notebook, and then stay connected to us, because what we really try to do is make that match, as I said. Companies needing particular talent, and women or men who can provide that, but perhaps in a way that is just not, is a little bit outside the box. It's a little bit more flexible, a little bit more forgiving of, and helping life and work synthesize. Well, that's it. Thank you for having me.